I built this application in Python and R. I actually created the LLC, worked with Virginia Tech, and I hand wrote letters that I sent to CEOs of hundreds of companies, right? Like, so companies, so health care centers in like all over the world, all over the US. Um, the CEO of Epic, the CEO of Cerner, the CEO of Click. That's actually how I got into working at Click.
Hi, welcome to Housing on Ramp. This is a podcast for beginners, experts, and innovators in real estate and data science. This is where the Polygon research team and our friends share our thoughts about housing, AI, careers, and everything in between. My name is Elvin Lee. Me is our Chief Technology Officer, Greg Olivan. Greg, we have a very exciting guest today, but before we begin, do you want to talk a little bit about what's going on at Polygon Research?
Sure. Thanks, Alvin. We've had a busy week, actually. We launched a new version of what I think we consider our flagship app, Hum Division. 7.0 is now live, and it's got a lot of great new features for competitive intelligence and fair lending analysis. And so we're really excited about that launch.
Awesome. Thank you for that. We will link our website in the show notes. Be sure to check out Hum Division and all of our products. Welcome to our conversation with Dr. Tomi Komolafe. Dr. Komolafe focused on statistical modeling and machine learning in his PhD in data science, and he applied these methodologies to quality and process improvement, natural language processing, and network modeling. He has published many papers in these fields, and we'll include the links to those in our show notes. How are you doing, Tommy?
Pretty good. It's funny you started with that because today I received um, a note from a journal, Network Science, I believe, saying one of my 3 years ago when I finished my PhD, there was a paper I did not get to publish. And just this year, I was able to work with my advisor. They reached out to me. So it's going to be out very soon. So there's going to be a new paper added to that list. So it's satisfying. It's a very satisfying feeling to see work that you've put a lot of effort into uh, be put out to the masses.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear, and we're definitely looking forward to reading your new paper. And that's, I think, a great segue into our first topic, which is how did you get into data science, and why the PhD?
Ooh. So this fact is important. I am Nigerian, and Nigerians, we have a notoriety of pursuing diplomas. That's kind of our thing. We get a lot of degrees. Just something to keep in mind. And I'd gotten a master's in chemical engineering. This was 2012, and I was working at GE, General Electric, as an engineer, working on the parts. And my dad felt that if I stayed at GE, I wouldn't pursue the highest degree, which is a PhD. And he felt, as the oldest, I'm the oldest in the family, I'm the oldest of four. He wanted the oldest son to be a symbol to the younger siblings of the importance of education. So he and I made a bet while I was at GE that I would go back to school and get a PhD. And he, at that time, was 59. He would also go back to school and get a law degree. So we both stopped our careers, successful careers at that time. I went to pursue a PhD, and he went to go pursue a law degree. I chose data science because at GE, I noticed that many of the processes we were working on could gain a lot of benefits from being automated. So there were a big thing in GE then was you're working on these parts. I worked on GE Aviation. Let me clarify that. So the part of GE that makes airplanes or the engines that go on airplanes, that's what I worked on. That's the division I worked in as a manufacturing engineer. And as you'd imagine, it takes a long time for an airplane engine to be created, like usually like 3 to 6 months. And it's a very expensive process. And a lot of capital is tied into making a part go from raw to finished. So you know GE maybe puts in $10 million into making an engine that's going to cost they're going to sell for 8 million. Like they put in way more money into making an engine than they actually gain from selling the engine, and there's a lot of effort into reducing that cost. And the cost is usually in raw materials, making the process faster, like understanding the supply chain. These are like data problems. And back in 2011, 2012, big data was like this thing that was coming around, right? People were trying to like get their heads wrapped around what's big data. How do we like get in data that's coming in at high velocity, unstructured data, and make it make sense? And that's why I decided, knowing this was a uh, a huge concern at GE, I felt if I went back to school with my background in mathematics, with my expertise in manufacturing, I could get a PhD in data science and come up with ways to automate the process, help people understand what parts of the cycle itself is causing the longest lag, where to get the raw materials from, like using data specific tools rather than what I was doing back then was intuition, right? Oh, okay, this part is going to take 3 weeks to convert into a shaft, a shaft. So we need to order three more of these parts, and that's kind of how we were all working back then. So that was kind of the genesis of my reasoning to get a PhD in data science. But again, the reason I actually left GE was because of this bet with my dad.
Well, who won the bet? We have to ask.
Well, I guess we both won. He's a lawyer. He got a law degree, so he was an accountant prior. So my dad was an accountant for 30 years, and he went to get a degree in tax law, which makes sense as an accountant, right? That's kind of a nice segue. So now he's a consultant in Nigeria, where he works with multiple firms as their tax law accountant or tax lawyer. And I also got my PhD in data science. So uh, it worked out for both of us, I would say. So I'm glad he made me do it, though. I am.
I think it's nice to hear that it took um, a long journey from the theoretical knowledge in mathematics and a long journey as well from with the practical knowledge of you working at GE to even get to a point uh, of realization that I want and need this degree.
That is well said. Yes. Yeah, I had like you said, my bachelor's was in mathematics, but back then as a bachelor, I was a 21-year-old kid that didn't really know what problems I could solve. I just knew like most kids then what I was good at, not really what I could solve, right? So I knew I was good in science and math. So I just pursued that. And like you said, while I was getting my degree in mathematics, I was worried that my options for jobs or careers would be limited if I just stayed in math. That's why I got an engineering degree. All right. So I wanted to kind of flex my possibilities. So I had a math background, the chemical engineering, and again, degree chasing like a Nigerian would do. I got a PhD in something totally different. So
So and from then on, you moved on to Click. You are currently a solutions architect at Click. Um, could you talk a bit more about how and why you started working for Click?
yeah, that's also I think that's an interesting story itself. So 4 years into my PhD, when I knew my PhD was wrapping up, I started looking around at my job prospects. While I was getting my PhD, I was doing work as a researcher, so with a healthcare firm, MedStar in DC, and I was also doing work with a startup company as their data scientist, socially determined, also in DC. And I could see that the outlook for someone that has a PhD in data science was going to be sitting in the back in a cubicle building data models and seeing other people discuss the data models I built and not having to interact with the customers. And that was so not me, right? Like in GE, I was in the managerial track. That's kind of what I enjoyed and liked. And I enjoyed that people part. And I was worried that getting this PhD, especially if people find that you're very good at one thing, they tend to kind of pigeonhole you into that. So I asked around what are my options for a job that puts me in a customer facing role. I asked around. Many suggested, okay, since you have no actual expertise or experience, start a job first as a researcher and see what happens. I wanted to do things differently. I had built some applications in my while as a PhD student that I thought I could sell. So I actually built some applications while working with these startup companies that I felt very confident that I could sell these applications and make money. So I started my own LLC. I started a LLC called Lucid Healthcare, where I build these applications in Python and R that do natural language processing. That's what they do. So you go to a healthcare hospital center, and the application I built could look through their records, specifically the notes doctors and physicians write. Like, so when they write notes into their systems, Epic, Cerner, and so forth, I could look through all those notes and come up with like aggregates of what's the trend, because it could analyze the actual text documents and let the hospital know in this month of the notes that 60 or plus doctors wrote, 5,000 have to do with like spilled blood, right? Or 300 have to do with mislabeled tubes, or 100 have to do with untrained nurses, right? So this way, the hospital could get a handle on what events are tracked in the wrong way. So I built this application in Python and R. I actually created the LLC, worked with Virginia Tech. So we had a startup group at Virginia Tech, and I hand wrote letters that I sent to CEOs of hundreds of companies, right? Like, so companies, so health care centers in like all over the world, all over the US, the CEO of Epic, the CEO of Cerner, the CEO of Click. That's actually how I got into working at Click, because some of those CEOs did respond to me. So that was like, I was so bold and naive that I did it, that I didn't even like I didn't think it wouldn't work, if that makes sense. I just expected it to work. And I just kept doing it. Like I said, I sent hundreds of letters, and a few people reached back. Some had like ideas of how they could partner with me. Back then, I was a broke college student, had no money. So Mike Capone, the CEO of Click, reached out to me, asked me to talk to. Back then, we had the healthcare vertical. Brad Copeland was the director there, and he and I spoke, chatted for a bit. And the way things worked out, Click, the software, was used in one of the hospitals that I had done research in. And one of the folks there had worked at Click also. And he said, "Oh, you should definitely just work at Click." And that was kind of how the things kind of turned around, because back then, like I said, I had no capital, so I could have gone on my own and started this LLC as a consultant, working on my own and traveling between hospitals and selling my application, using Click as my as kind of the medium to get into these hospitals. That was my plan A. But plan B was get a job at Click. The offer was really good, right? They were going to offer me a lot of money, and back then that was way more money than I'd ever expected to make. So I was like, I'll just do this for a bit, make some money, and maybe I'll go back to this LLC as time permits. So that's the genesis of how I got into Click, how I got into my role as a solution architect. When I was speaking to the folks, they let me know that yes, even with my background as a researcher, they could provide for me a role where I would still do something customer facing. So
We're really happy to hear that background, and there's a lot of different interesting elements that are germane to our focus on ramp into a career, on ramp into an industry in this podcast. Tell us a little bit more about Click, though. We at Polygon Research use Click. We rely heavily on it. We love Click. But for those folks who might not know Click, can you give us the big picture about the company and start with the spelling, if you don't mind?
yeah. The spelling is Qlik, which I guess if someone just saw that on paper, they would think it's Qlik, but it's click, like clicking a button. So I've given you that. That's the spelling. What do you want to know when you ask about the company? What are you interested in? The culture or the product or
Well,
the,
maybe the product. What kind of company is Click for those who
I see.
might not have come across it yet?
Yeah. So I'll start off. I'll be brief in in the product itself because it's gone through some transition. When I started with Click was the one of the premier business analytics tools. So what Click did then was you get your data from multiple sources. Click helps you find insights in that from that data. Now we've really transitioned from just being a business analytics tool to being like an end-to-end data analytics and intelligence platform. So we don't only show you the insights. We get the data from wherever it sits, if it's Snowflake, Azure, Oracle, whatever, into some other whatever cloud storage location. We get the data from there. We help you do the analytics on it, and then we help you take action on it. So in the 3.5 years I've been at Click, I've really seen the company transition from showing you dashboards to becoming this end-to-end action engine, right? So from the data to putting it in whatever data source or data warehouse you have, to getting your insights from the data, to creating alerts, sending, and you guys do this already, using Click to talk to other applications like ServiceNow and so forth. So it's really become a platform, not just a business analytics tool.
No, I was just going to note that we take advantage of some of
Yeah.
those broader capabilities, and it's been great to be part of that evolution of the company.
Have you? I'm curious, as a aside question, as you guys have also used Click. I'm curious, what have you guys noticed? Have like in those capabilities, which of those have stuck to you as like, wow, this is kind of novel and impactful? Because we internal to Click, we are unaware of what actually sticks. If that makes sense.
Sure. Well, I think Click has got a great story with still its core data analytics, business intelligence capabilities.
Mm,
Its scalability in particular is something that's key to our success as a company and how we've grown from a single customer to the multiple customers we have now. The in-memory aspect of how data is presented in Click that allows our customers to interact with our complex data sets exactly how they want to, and dealing with microdata,
mm,
that's key. And so the first thing I'd emphasize with Click is one of the original features that you guys have just scaled up really well, brought to the cloud, and allowed us to control
mm.
and scale depending on our customer footprint.
Yeah.
But then more recently, in your SaaS offering, the Click automations are really fantastic. And we're just, I think, scratching the surface with that, with doing automated reports for one of our customers,
Yeah,
drawing
active
on
intelligence.
active intelligence, drawing on our existing dashboards that we've created, but then pulling that into very customized workflows where we build a report and email it to clients. That's a really powerful capability, and I think we'll really be exploring more and more of that.
Wow. As you say that, I have to remind myself and like snap myself in the head like the automation piece was just late last year. It's still very recent, right? Like
Hmm.
October. That's even when I learned, and I'm a Click employee. I learned about this like October last year. Like, oh, hey, this thing, and so that's good to know. I'm glad you didn't mention the core capability, the ability to scale in mass, right, with whatever data sources you have and get to the details.
Yep.
That's something that I think gets lost in the weeds when Click is put alongside other tools because that's a that kind of benefit is something you only get after you've invested a lot in the product. So most people don't start their journey in business analytics putting all their data into the tool, right? They usually
Hmm.
start with like a business unit and then they scale up to maybe a department and so forth.
Yeah.
So they don't run into that issue of scale till they're already entrenched in the product.
Hmm.
And you bring that to like as a like the first like this is that important.
It's a really key advantage for us, and a key advantage that Click brings. Absolutely.
That's good to know because I know in Click the internally, so you're gonna get some, I guess, some uh eyes behind the curtain, eyes behind the veil. There's tension between what's the right marketing strategy. Do we hamper down and stick to the core capabilities as that's what makes us different, or do we try to be shiny and sexy and new, and talk about the
Yeah.
new things that make us like, wow, look at this. We can do this now. We can do that now. So, anyways, both seem important to
Wait,
me. Yeah, both of
let me
them.
turn that around to you and talk about some of the shiny new. Another fantastic uh, feature or wing of the company that you've rolled out is your Click AutoML. We
Yes.
used this last year in an earlier version, and it really helped us out with a class that we were teaching, a data science class.
Okay.
And I'm curious about your perspective now that you've ingested this and you're evolving it. Click AutoML. Uh, what are your thoughts about just AutoML in general? Since you've written stuff from scratch, bottom up, how do you view AutoML, and how do you view your product among the competitors?
Um, it's that's a good question. So I think when AutoML was rolled out, which again was late last year, I was at first skeptical, because I think I'll use the analogy of I because I'd used very complicated tools. When I say complicated, meaning like Python and R. That's kind of where I that was my bread and butter in grad school. I My first things were, oh, I can't do this in AutoML. I can't do this in AutoML. I can't do these things I'm used to doing.
Tommy, could you explain what the difference is between ML or machine learning or and auto machine learning?
Oh, that's good. That's actually a very good point. So, machine learning, the idea of machine learning in general is you have historical data and you have all these algorithms that can look at that historical data, find some pattern, and then help make predictions and also drive like prescriptive action. So you get all this data from whatever sources it is. Maybe you want to predict when a part or tool will fail, right? You have historical data on that. You have all these algorithms that can look at this historical data and give you some idea of one, what's driving tool breakage or tool wear, and then predict when a particular tool will wear or break. So that's machine learning as a whole. It's an entire planet or universe of problems and solutions. AutoML is the ability, or it's a new way of getting 80 to 90% of those insights in very much low code, no code way, right? That's the idea. So in the past, to get these insights, you'd have to train some model in Python or whatever language you have. This is traditional machine learning. Build the models, save that again in Python and R in some code format, and then apply your uh, the data to it, get your results, and the entire workflow, the entire pipeline is relies on expertise in data science or expertise in coding, right? The entire pipeline of doing this in the good old days relied heavily on the expertise in coding. Now the benefit of AutoML is you don't really have to know how to code to get most of the benefits. Now, of course, knowing how to code or knowing what's going on in the back end helps. But what AutoML does, it really helps kind of idiot proof many of the things you could do wrong. And I think that was the part that I am now beginning to, um, that's the benefit I'm now beginning to see because we've worked with customers at Click, a recent customer that they were looking to predict parking lot capacity in airports. And they were using AutoML, and this customer had no expertise or background at all in data science. They just had their data on historical parking, even including COVID months or COVID years, and they wanted to see if AutoML could help them move just the needle of prediction 1%. If you imagine parking lots for airports, they generate, and we did the math with the customer, about close to $1 billion a year in revenue. So if you can move just 1%, right, I believe that's 100. I might be off 10 million. Just 1% of that. That's $10 million. And we were able to show them using AutoML with no code, just drag and drop, put your data in, that they could actually get very good predictions on what their predicting future parking capacity, and they can then flex their price accordingly. They could anticipate high, spikes in, in parking for holidays, weekends, and so forth. We're able to show them what's actually driving these behaviors from passengers, right? And so that was something that's a benefit I've seen from AutoML, and that's a utility AutoML provides in the data science space. Like, it makes it such that folks that have no background or expertise in data science can still get those same benefits.
We've tuned into there's a Facebook engineer named Bahadur Kalagi who writes about the time, talent, trust paradigm for thinking about AutoML,
Hmm.
that it saves you time, reduces, as you're pointing out, Tomi, the need for talent or a certain type of talent,
Mm.
experienced programmers.
Yes, yes.
There's an interesting element about trust there too, because I think AutoML enforces some consistency on an approach. And to your point, it's sort of straight down the middle. Maybe it's that the fat part of the bell curve, and maybe it doesn't do everything, but it does what it does in a consistent way. Does that resonate with your thinking, since you've approached this question from both angles?
That's a yeah. I didn't. I've not thought of it in those three ways. The three T's. I'll have to use that in my next speech or spiel with customers: time, talent, and trust. So the trust part, what you're saying is, because of many of the processes, kind of like I said, not ADA proof, but staged, it makes it harder to deviate and maybe make your own little nuke and corner,
Right.
your little have your little model that maybe it's great for this one use case, but not great for all use cases. That is true. I would say that is very true. Um, what I would say also is, because of that automation of the process, um, it's easier to believe the results. What that means is, if I use AutoML in Click and chat across the, uses the same model or uses the same tool, there's that trust in, he knows I'm not finagling somewhere in the back end doing something
Mhm.
that he doesn't know about. And I know he's also not finagling somewhere back end. So when we both look at our results in the end, we both can, like, trust that, yeah, it's about the same thing.
Mhm.
So I do like that. That's a good point. That's a good point.
How does Click place itself in this larger, I think, revolution, or a gradual revolution in the data science field?
Whew. Uh, so how does Click as a company see itself?
Yeah, in terms of AutoML, or I guess the smaller question is, how do you see yourself um, as the field progresses?
Oh, I see, I see, I see. I see. I think there's like maybe a slight bifurcation right now in the area of machine learning, right? So there are those that are looking to be PhDs, like I was, and solve PhD level problems. But I think, this is just my expertise now, 70 to 80% of the problems can be done using, you know, uh, using capabilities that already exist in AutoML, um, without having to, how do I, it's that 80-20% Pareto rule, right? We can solve 80% of the problems now with just AutoML, and maybe we can leave the 20% of the problems of the world to the data scientist. And I think what the BI spaces, like I said, the bifurcation I'm seeing is, some folks are trying to solve the 20% problem, where there's this huge meat of, this 80% problem. For example, parking lot, predicting parking lot capacity. That is something lots of people can relate to, not just airports. And that's something that AutoML does perfectly well. You don't need any advanced, models to solve this problem. Um, I'm doing something right now on inventory planning, right? This is a problem most people can relate to, right? Like, how do I, plan when to buy new products for if I'm Amazon, if I'm some warehouse, how do I know when to plan to buy the next, set of products? Or when do I buy the next Lululemon stockings, right? Like things that are very tangible. You don't need, like I said, an advanced data scientist to solve this problem. All the tools we have in AutoML can solve that right now. And in fact, I'm building something to solve that right now. So good question. Good question. So in summary, I see us solving the 80% problem, and we'll let the rest of the world, or the rest of the BI folks that are looking to be data, like PhD data scientists, go solve the 20%.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting time where, and you mentioned it earlier, Tomi, about the no code arena within the broader software
Mhm.
domain,
Yeah.
where you don't have to write everything from scratch anymore. It was within the last few months that um, an AI algorithm scored the median score on a coding challenge that was from DeepMind. And if programs are writing programs at about the median level compared to people, it just emphasizes the point that there are ways to get started in IT, in software, without having to know the languages like you used to. And I think you guys are demonstrating that with your AutoML, with the automation, click automation workflows that I mentioned earlier. Those are both no code interfaces. You can just figure out, uh, the GUI interface, how to point and click, and start building something right away. So
Okay.
very, very interesting time right now.
Thanks for, yeah, that's such a good point. That you're also noticing that trend, I think is good. Um, Meaning, uh, what will win in the future is likely simplicity, not complexity. And the direction click, or the focus click, is the place click is focusing, is simplicity, right?
Mhm.
And I think, like, that's why I mentioned this bifurcation. I feel uh, other folks are maybe trying to go the complex route because that's what they think will be a differentiator, right? So good note.
Thank you for that. So right now we have a few questions that we ask all of our special guests. Who are some of your mentors in data science or in business in general? Um, and how have they changed your career?
Wow. Um, my first, he probably doesn't even know who he is. My first mentor, and I forget his name now. It's interesting. Was the first person that showed me while I was at GE that you could write a macro in Excel to automate a process.
Mm.
Because back in GE in Excel, I was keeping track of like millions of dollars of parts moving across the factory line, and I would like each day come up, each morning, like, okay, at 5 a.m., 7 a.m., this part was here, and then 7:45, it's gonna come here, and that was how I did my work. And this guy, what he did as his hobby was he was a do you know what a CAD designer is? Like people that do the 3D designs of buildings. That's what they did as a hobby. So he would do CAD drawings, and I saw him do something in Excel where he was like coming up with like blueprints for some design. And I was like, hey, how did you do that? I didn't even know Excel had a macro like in the back end. He showed me that. And that's actually what was the fire that made me realize that I could go into data science. So I didn't say that in the beginning, but that was the first kind of click when I saw I could code. I took some like did some YouTubing, coded my own first, macros in Excel, and we saved, then GE millions of dollars because this tracking that was being done manually was now this code that just ran every morning, and cuts, 3 4 people's, days of work into just minutes. So that was my first mentor. My second would be my advisor at um, my PhD program at Virginia Tech, Sri Hansen Gupta. Amazing. He was patient and he trusted in my capacity and capability. So I give him a lot of credit. And then lastly, the at Click, uh, I've had, like, I would say it's a team of people that have give me the confidence to take the mantle as the data science person here. So I would say they all get the credit as mentors because in one way, shape, or other, they've both given me the confidence to, I guess, proudly try new things that click, proudly fail, and proudly try again. So they get those credits too. So those are mentors.
Awesome. Thank you. And now I'm gonna sort of give you the role of being a mentor for a quick second. So I am someone who's new, relatively, to data science. What would be a piece of a piece of advice that you would give me or anyone who's looking to start their career in data science?
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, Start. I think that's a good thing. Like if it's taking a course in Coursera, if it's working on a project that's a passion of yours, like start something. You learn the most not by thinking about it, but just like if you like for me, jumping into the healthcare space and just telling them I would love to help you guys solve your problems. I'm gonna learn R. I'd never coded in R before, but I was like, I'm willing to learn to like help you guys. And 3, 4 years later, I had built an application that I could sell. Right, like the biggest thing I did was start, even without the experience or the expertise. I was this 26-year-old in PhD program, and I was like, I'll just start. So that's I would say the first thing, just start. It could be a class, it could be a project, it could be like whatever, just start. Um, and secondly, it's hard for most people. I think we I used to think, oh, if I don't get it, you know, immediately, then maybe my brain isn't meant to be a coder. Because my brother is actually a phenomenal coder, and he puts me to shame. And when we were in college together, so I didn't code, I just did math rather than computer science in college because I saw how good my brother was, and I was like, I can't be that good. Like he just makes it look so easy. And I lost my train of thought, but I would say, even though he made it look so easy, I think for most people, just like playing the guitar, whatever it is, the first time, it's hard for everyone. It's hard for everyone. And then once you get good at it, you realize like, okay, it's just like a language. It really is just like a language. And then you start to think like it, and then it's easy afterwards. Well, easier, not easy. So
I think I read somewhere that the most important thing you could do for learning is just to be exposed to it.
yeah, yeah, I would agree. I would agree. Yes, I would agree so much.
Do you have any book recommendations? Can you name 3 books that you would recommend in any field?
Um, I'm a big reader, so this is actually like a passion question of mine. If you ask me books, I'm gonna go on and on and on. But I'll start off with my top book. I'll start with just last year. Maybe that's a good like partitioning. Three Body Problem. I recommend everyone read the Three Body Problem. It is fast. It's phenomenal. It it's written so well. There are moments when I was reading the book that I thought, did this guy go into the future, see what's going to happen in the future, and then write about it? Because it's that detailed. So it's a series. It's 3 books. So the Three Body Problem. The second one is A Gentleman in Moscow. Very, 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 very good book. Um, I forget the author's name, but it describes this guy that's been, I guess, how in house arrest in Moscow, but the detail of his life as is in house arrest or in Moscow during the period of World War II into the Cold War, you get to see and learn about events in Russia from his perspective. And he's a very witty person. So the protagonist is this witty guy that you get to see as he ages and so forth. So that's a very good book. And the last one, I'm torn between sci-fi versus sappy crying book. I'll go with sappy. I'll go with Cry, The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. Uh, Very good book. On historical fiction, it talks about 2 sisters and their life together in German occupied France during World War II. The reason why I really like this one is I think most of us can relate to the tension siblings can have, or not just siblings, but like really close friends, right? Where both sides are both sides can be right and yet still not agree and yet still butt heads and yet still cause conflict, even though both sides are genuinely right. Like in the book, you see life from the perspective of the bold younger sister that wants to be a revolutionist versus the cautious older sister that's looking to take care of the younger sister and make sure that the family doesn't like rip apart because of the behavior of the younger sister. And both, I mean, both ways of living are correct. But I don't know, it was a very, very well written book. Very, very good. Very, very good. So I recommend all three.
What do you think about the Foundation series versus the Three Body Problem?
What's the
I know
foundation
Greg has
series?
a lot to
Oh,
talk
okay. You
about.
could.
I don't
I've
know.
read both, so you've got a little catching up to do. That's Asimov, dating back to the 1940s, the Foundation trilogy, and then he extended it later. I think you'll really enjoy that when you get a chance to tackle those.
Really? So, okay, is it related to the three body problem? Because you made it sound like it's.
I think the author of the latter alludes in one. There's one point in which he alludes back to Asimov in a subtle way,
Ah,
and you'll notice it if you've read the Foundation. Yeah.
okay, thank you. So you've read the three body problem then, I see.
Yes, yeah, I have. Well, listened to, if that counts in
Yeah,
your,
yeah,
but yeah, I've consumed the whole series. So, like Alvin said, I think we have some good follow-up conversations.
yeah. Okay, the foundation theories on my head now.
And
That's
to
good.
give you a sneak peek, I think Greg, correct me if I'm wrong. I think Asimov basically was talking about machine learning and called it like psychology, mathematical psychology or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, he called it psychohistory,
Right, psychohistory. Yeah.
and it's sort of like reinforcement learning,
Yeah.
but I haven't really thought about that in those terms very carefully. And for those who don't know, reinforcement learning is one of the main areas of machine learning. So,
Yes.
and that has to do that gets into the domain of robots to a high degree. So,
Yeah.
and Asimov wrote a lot about robots. So
Wow.
there's some really interesting thoughts to explore there. I think you'll appreciate that as you're reading those books, Tomi.
And he wrote this in the 40s?
Started in the 40s. I couldn't tell you the exact dates, but yeah.
When he was like, I think 21, he started working on
Oh my gosh. Okay. What did I do when I was 21? Okay.
that.
That's
That's
one of
how I
those.
feel.
That's like one of those, like, oh, he wrote that when he was 21. Okay. What was I
Yeah.
doing? That is awesome. I'm gonna add that to my list now. So I'm currently finishing Patrick Rothfuss, like the Name of the Wind, right? So that's the first book I've read. That the second one is The Wise Man's Fear. It's very Harry Potter esque. So
Hmm.
I recommend that to if you're like teenage, young adult. For me as an older adult, I'm like, okay, it's a bit cheesy to be honest. But that's why I like the three body problem. And if you notice the other books I've mentioned, there's a bit more darkness and uh, yes, and possibility.
That's wonderful. I'm glad this has turned into some ideas about our reading lists, and you've given, myself included. Uh, I think we had one final area that we wanted to get into, just from our discussion before the podcast. You mentioned some personal thoughts about the real estate industry. Do you have any experiences or thoughts there you want to tell us about?
Ooh, remind me of the discussion. Sorry.
Did you mention you were starting to shop for a house?
Yes. Oh, yes, that part. Oh gosh, yes. It's funny you say that. Today was I received my offer. Is it called an offer? Like the loan where you get like finance approval. I'm not sure
Hmm.
the right terminology is. Basically, the bank say we can loan you this amount of money.
Oh,
So there's
pre-approval,
Great.
I think.
yes, that one, the pre-approval letter that now I can now go to sellers and tell them, hey, a bank trusts me with this amount of money. Would you give me your house? Now in this market now, I'm not sure if everyone else is aware of this. You're living under some rock somewhere. But the market is so hot and steaming hot that sellers have basically all the power. So as a buyer now, there's a lot more uh was like not just steps. There's a lot more we have to show as a buyer, a lot more data points we have to give to the seller for them to even consider you as one of the 50 or 100 competitors for the bidding for a house, right? Not just the approval letter anymore. How much cash do you have on hand? How much collateral are you willing to put down? There's all these other things now that's part of the formula for buying a house that I was told 6 months ago didn't exist. So as a seller now, it is painful. Is the word overwhelming? Maybe is a better word. Not painful. It's overwhelming. It's
As the buyer, as the person shopping for the house.
Sorry, the buyer as a buyer.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it, and we of course have heard similar stories and anecdotes about what's going on out there. I think that's a good topic. If you'd be willing, we of course hope to have you back on for a second conversation, maybe when you're on the other side of that process, and see what you've learned by going through it.
That'll be really good. Yeah, because I know I'm actually curious to get your feedback since you guys work on the other side of the ledger. Um, what are you guys noticing, right? So you guys are working with the folks giving out the money or like lending out the money. What are you guys noticing in terms of patterns and any advice for a new home buyer? Please help me.
Yeah, I wish I had some specific advice, and Alvin, feel free to jump in. But as far as trends go, I do think that the rates are rising, so it's becoming a little bit more difficult to buy a higher priced home because it's becoming more expensive. And yet it's still a seller's market with respect to a constricted supply. And that, however, varies a lot by geography. And so if you have flexibility, and some of these patterns have changed because of COVID, if you have flexibility about where you want to live, that gives you more power as a buyer. But if you're locked into a particular market, and that's, as you point out, a really hot market, it's really difficult. We've heard all sorts of stories about people are buying houses without even seeing them. And it's just super competitive. There are, I think,